Hello and welcome to the second LiveCycle tutorial video. In this video I'm going to take a request from the Adobe forums and show my solution and how I arrived at it through LiveCycle. The request coming from the forums was for a table as shown, in which as a row is added and a payment is entered in the second column, the third column has a cumulative payment that is the total of all the previous payments. So we'll start by simply adding a table onto our form here. We need 3 columns and 1 row. We're going to have a header just to keep track of what we're doing. Now, let's go ahead and name our table before we get into it. TPL payments, since these are payments. And let's name our, first we need the period, which will actually make this automatically fill in. That'll be convenient for the user. A payment header, and finally the payments. Now in each field, in the first field, we're not going to actually do any calculation with what's inside of this, so we'll just use a text field. And for the other 2 fields, we need numeric fields because we actually will calculate with the payments. The cumulative payment, we could leave a text field since we won't be doing any calculations with it, but for sake of consistency and the fact that calculations are being performed, we'll make that a numeric field. Let's go back and rename TF period to match the fact that it's a text field and what it's for. Our numeric field here for payments, and let's call this one NF cumulative. As a matter of fact, we aren't actually going to need this. We could have left it whatever it was called, but we're going to name it anyway. Next, we also need a button to add rows, so that way the user can add multiple rows. Change the text, add row, and change the name. Add row. Now, one last thing I want to do here. The rows, since we're going to be adding, we need to set the binding to allow multiple rows. So let's come over here to binding and check the box for repeat row. Let's start with a minimum of 1. We don't actually be removing any rows in this example. This was just a how could you make the table do what I wanted it to do. So let's come back to our period, this text field. Now, each period is going to be subsequently numbered, or consecutively numbered. So period 1, 2, 3, based on which row it's in. So as we create a new row with our add row, every time a new row is created, the layout has to report back that it's ready to allow the user to enter information. So we're going to start layout ready with this event. And in the event, the text we want here is to have this meaning the box, obviously, the cell, value. We're going to set it equal to 1 more than the index of the row. So this dot parent, which gives us the row, dot instance index. This by itself will give us 0 in the first row, 1 in the second. So we need to add 1 to it. Since instance index is an integer, I can just say +1. But in his specifications, he asked for a period at the end. So I need to make this into text, which means I'll need this part to be an integer. So parse int, and then I'm going to add period. Now, before we go any further, let's just go ahead and test with preview and make sure that this actually went where we wanted it to go. we have nothing. So let's hit it back and see what we might have done wrong. Parsing does not need to be capitalized. Get to the preview. 1. As we start adding rows, which we haven't done it yet, we should see it increase. So let's go take care of adding rows now. Select add row, and I'm going to enter here is, table payments dot row 1 dot instance manager. This is the manager that will allow you to add and remove instances of a particular item, in this case the row. We have to go through this to get to those other functions. So instance manager dot add instance. You can see add instance already highlighted right off the bat. I'm going to select that. Now this boolean inside of this, what this means is if we put true, then the instance will be added. If we put false, it will not be. We can put conditions in here later on. We may discuss that. But usually, the add instance doesn't even get called until there's already been a check if there's going to be a condition. You can see the brackets around bool param1. That indicates that this is in fact optional, so we don't even actually need that. In most cases, I don't use it, but something may come up later that we will. So let's go back to our preview. Now we've added our line there, and wow, something's not right. So let's come back here. Design. I put this under layout ready. I didn't change where it went. So let's take that away. We want this on the click event for our button. Now back to preview. Now as we add a row, you can see period gets added, or I'm sorry, the number for the period gets added each time we add a row automatically. We don't have to do anything else to that. From a design perspective, because we're doing this automatically, we would actually want this to be set to read only. We don't actually want people changing that if we're doing it automatically. Now the payment, this is just a numeric field. We're going to be entering numbers in. The cumulative payment is where all the action happens. We want to make sure that anytime there is a cumulative payment, we're going to calculate all the previous payments and add it in here. So let's put this in our calculate event. First, I'm going to create a variable called rows. This is going to hold all of the rows, in particular the NF payment that's within each row. That's all I really care about here. So I'm going to use this XFA resolve nodes, and in particular I want TPL payments dot row 1. And now, since row 1 will become an array of rows, we'll use our brackets with a star, because I don't care what number it is. And NF payment, because I only want to affect or use that particular field. Close parentheses. Now next, I need a subtotal. And now I need a loop to wrap through and add to the subtotal each time we get another payment. So for equals 0, which is just our counter, less than rows dot length. Rows has a length because it is an array, and the length is the total number of items in the array. So if there's one item, the index is 0 and the length is 1. If there's 5 items, the highest index is 4 and the length is 5. And as we proceed through this loop, we're just going to increase our count. Every time we go through the loop, we want to add to our subtotal. subtotal equals subtotal plus row, and in order to access a particular item, we have to say item, parentheses, and then whatever our counter is, in this case, raw value, because I want the number that's inside. After I've looped through, I want to set the value inside, dot raw value, to subtotal. So, before we do anything else, let's go back to our preview and see what we get. Okay, as you can see, it's currently 0 because there's nothing here. It knows how to handle null fields. So let's add a couple of rows first. Let's say put 1 here. 1 gets added, good. 2 here. Well, this is good. It is adding 1 plus 2 to get 3. But at this point in the first period, we shouldn't have a cumulative payment of 3. It should still be 1. So let's go back to our design. What we need is another condition to stop adding once it reaches a certain point. In this case, this would be a good place here. So we want it to stop at the end, or when the counter I has reached the same row as the payment itself that we're looking at. So in the first row, index would be 0, we want to stop at 0. And in the second row, the index is 1, so we want the 0 index in the first index. So we're going to say less than or equal to this parent's index. This is the index of the row that you're in at the time. Remember, each one of these cumulative payment fields is going to get its own script. So it always knows to stop at its own row. Let's come back to our preview. Let's make sure this works. So throw in a couple extra rows. So 1 for the first one, 2 for the second one. This is good. So 1 is 1, and then 1 plus this 2 is 3. So if we put 3 here, we should get 6 at the bottom. There we go. Now, after I submitted the solution, I got back, hey, this works perfectly, but, and anyone who's ever dealt with creeping scope already has that in their head that, oh, he said but. So the next request, as you can see here, was to add the option to leave the cumulative payment blank if there was no payment. So what I suggested, which would work pretty easily, is we come back and we only perform this operation if there's something in the NF payment field. So what we'll do is we'll wrap this entire section of code here inside an if statement. If NF payment, if it's not the case that NF payment is null, then we perform this task. And since LiveCycle since it doesn't do it on its own, I'll do this. And otherwise, if there's nothing there, then we want this dot raw value to be blank. Now, remember before, when we didn't make any changes to it, it was always 0. But he really wants it blank, so we've left it blank now if there's nothing in the payment. This condition, if the exclamation mark means not the case, if it's not the case, that NF payment is null. So if there's something there, then we do this process. If not, we leave it blank. Let's go back to our preview. As you can see from the start, this is now blank instead of 0 because there's nothing here. Add a couple of rows, so here's 1. 1 gets added, and we'll put 2. So our addition is still working. Let's skip a row and put 3 here. Now you can see it's adding in. A couple more rows just to say we've really done our due diligence here. We know it is now working. All the cumulative payments are coming in, and it's skipping when we skip a payment. The other thing to test, which is we know it's going to work because of the particular event that we use, but just as a, let's just see what happens. Let's throw another number in here. You can see 3 plus 10 is 13, and everything gets changed accordingly. So we know that all of these fields are in fact working. if we remove something that was in a row, say, oh, I didn't actually make a payment on the third period, everything goes away, and the calculate event knows to go back and redo its calculations if necessary. So that is the second tutorial. I will try to make this available to you in the description below. If you have any questions, please comment.